Right, morning. Welcome. Instinct and intuition. We are in for an interesting discussion. So, Lee, you better kick us off with this one. So, I think, as I might have mentioned yesterday, I've always been told that men don't have intuition. It's only the ladies that do. But not convinced that's the truth. But let's hear your thoughts on it.
I honestly, I do think that sometimes, I don't know whether it's we as women or, you get given certain credit where I'm not sure it's utterly due. So no, I think everybody has intuition. I do think maybe some people have more intuition than others. Um, and I think it's just the way your brain works. I think that Christopher will say he doesn't have much intuition. He relies on my intuition. And I think it's just because he sees things much more black and white and logical and, straight and, and I need that from him. But what is instinct and what is intuition? I think for me, so I didn't do any research, so I'm really hoping Edward's going to take us down that road. No. So instinct for me is something that is an automatic reaction. So you instinctively withdraw your hand from a hot stove, or you instinctively jump aside when, like, I was walking yesterday with Christopher in the park in Delta, and I stepped out to pass two ladies that were walking in front of us, and a bike came up behind me absolutely silently, had not, and of course maybe he didn't anticipate I was going to step to the side, but I just immediately just jumped back, and there was no crash, thank goodness. So I think there's that instinct that your body reacts quicker than your mind, and for me that is instinct. Intuition to me is picking up signals. It's reading a room. And again, you might not even be doing it consciously. Maybe it is the way you've either trained your brain, or something you develop with time, or something that maybe you do have, innately. Some people may have that sense greater developed in them, or greater built into them than others. But it's seeing. I can often walk into a room and feel, oh, there's tension here. And nobody's saying anything, but it's just the movement of a shoulder or an eye, and we talk about, cut the atmosphere with a knife. And what is that you picking up, that you can actually palpably feel the emotions swirling? I think it's also, for me, where intuition has shown up in my life is the people that I'm closely attached to, my children, my immediate family. There've been moments when I thought that there's something wrong. And I'll pick up the phone, or I just, especially when my kids were still living at home, I would, be at a party or something, and there's something not right. And sometimes, I'm not saying I got it right all the time, but sometimes I was glad that I did that, because, they were too nervous to call me, or something, they were uncomfortable in some way. And so I think that's where intuition has shown up for me. And I do think I do think both are important. I think people can also overestimate intuition as a source of information, as if the intuition is telling you something true. I think intuition is just a signal. And I think if you don't pay attention to it, I think you can get in trouble, but you do need to investigate it. So that's my feeling about intuition. It's signaling something that you need to pay attention to. It's not saying act on this intuition. So that's my take on instinct and intuition.
Thanks, Lee. Yeah, as you were talking, I was starting to wonder, is there actually a difference? But Ed, yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought it's quite interesting actually that there's a saying, how do you tell, or sorry, how do you know if someone's got an MBA? And the answer is, don't worry, they'll tell you. And I think we can add to that, how do you know when someone's got a linguistics degree? They'll ask you to discuss two words that are used interchangeably that shouldn't be. Because very often we'll say, I instinctively knew the answer. But what we actually mean was I used intuition to determine the answer. And we use the words, as I say, interchangeably, but they're not, they're different. But they actually have the same purpose almost, and they produce almost the same results, but the process is different. And I think instinct comes from our evolution. It's a process designed to help us survive in our environment. So it's about self-protection. It's about curiosity. It's about being social as well. It's all about what we need to survive. You know, how does a wildebeest know that he should be part of a herd? And how do we know that we should be part of a society or something? So I think instinct allows us to do stuff very, very quickly and avoid getting into trouble. Intuition, I think, is a purely human trait. And it's actually accessing our subconscious. And it's accessing information very quickly that otherwise would slow us down. Or it could be we're in a situation where we haven't got the time, or in fact, maybe the inclination to do the research. But intuition allows us to make a decision quickly by accessing information we've got. And it might be imperfect information, but it allows us to make a decision. And it perhaps then distinguishes us from computers that have to do calculations logically. We can take bits of information, access them without knowing we're accessing them, make a decision. And I'll give you an example. I think it was, I lose track of time with COVID. I think it was probably the summer before last. There was a knock on the door and there was this strange person there, and she was very, very upset, very agitated. And normally my instinct would have said, strange situation, strange person, run. Or in this case, slam the door in her face, or close the door, or say, no, thank you, go away. But she was asking to use my toilet, which is not something that normally happens. And my instinct, as I said, was to say no and shut the door. But my intuition told me this was a person that needed my help. So I invited her into the house. She used the toilet. When she came out, she was hyperventilating. She was in a complete state of stress. And I'd forgotten all about, this was a scam, or she was going to be an axe murderer, or whatever it was. I put my instinct aside and I got her to slow her breathing down, got her to breathe deeply, got her to calm down. And then she told me what had happened. And her dad lived across the road and he died. And she'd come round and found him dead. And she'd sorted out all the, getting the coroner to come and the funeral guys to come and all that sort of stuff. And I think she'd probably gone into instinct mode then to get that sort of stuff done. But unfortunately, he died on the toilet. and she'd waited a long time for the coroner to arrive, and she was dying for a pee. And she had to come to a stranger's house. And imagine what would happen had I shut the door on her. You know, my intuition told me this was a person grieving. This was a person desperate. This was a person that needed help. And I think that comes from having had previous experiences where you pick up signals and you use that to match the patterns. I think it's about patterns and the subconscious. And I know that when I go running, my mind goes quiet, my mind goes still, because all the oxygen's going to your legs and your lungs, quite frankly, and not a lot going to the brain. But when I come back, I've solved a problem because I've accessed, because I've quieted my conscious mind, I've my subconscious, and the subconscious is very powerful. I think that's where intuition comes from. And it's interesting, if I go to a networking event, or I go to a party, or whatever it is, I will end up talking to an accountant. Even if I don't know anything about them, or I go to maybe a lecture or something, I will be sitting next to an accountant. And I think intuitively, I pick up signals that this is a kindred spirit. And they did an experiment once where they put a load of people in a room. I think there were solicitors, architects, and accountants, and asked them to pair up without talking. And all the accountants chose accountants, because intuitively we pick up that stuff. So that's my thoughts on the subject. And I think, Lee's right. It's a signal. It's not necessarily a correct signal. You might have mismatched the patterns because you're working on incomplete information. But it's better to go with your intuition than your instincts, because you've learned more experiences, and it's more appropriate to the human condition, whereas instincts are more appropriate to the animal thing. Yeah, sometimes instincts are really good, isn't it? Loud noise, run. Ruddy great elephant, you want to run, but you should sit there patiently. And that was a really bizarre incident with that lady when she came round. But I'm really glad my intuition overcame my instincts.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Yeah, it is interesting, and I mean, there's this debate about whether animals have anything other than instinct, and I must admit, the more and more I look at it, I really start to wonder whether there's not a much more complex layer of ability in not all creatures, but certainly in some. I mean, if you just simply look at the way certain species adapt, and I mean, some of the classics are things and learn, and you look at chimps, you look at bonobos, which are a form of a chimpanzee, which are incredibly intelligent. And I saw a documentary of a lady, I think it was back in the 50s, who was studying these particular chimps, and the one male became her traveling companion. And he would go around with her on her research and all the rest of it, and they would stop and they would set up camp, and he would help set up the tent and do all sorts of different things, light the fire. Quite amazing how this male chimp had actually learned and adapted bonobo. He's not really a chimp, but I mean he looks like a chimp for those of us who don't really know what they are. But it was quite incredible the things that he'd learned to do, and was almost behaving, I mean, I think her description was he was operating at the level of a 6 or an 8-year-old human. So, quite capable of doing certain functions, and, having no problem in understanding that this was his role, and then he could do it. And so it's very interesting. And I mean, you can take it to to the orcas, for example, and you see how different pods of orcas specialize in different hunting techniques and different hunting prey. And the way they do that, I mean, the one that really amazed me with them is the ones that actually beach themselves to catch seals. So the orca will actually beach itself to catch its prey, and then wait for the next wave to roll in so it can actually get itself back into the water. Quite amazing for an animal of that size. I mean, if you think 6-ton animal beaching itself, what must be the risks? But they've clearly worked it out and are able to to do that quite successfully. So it is. I find it fascinating, this theory that animals only operate on instinct, and as I say, the more I see and the more I learn, I've really got to wonder whether that's true. But has it got anything to do with intuition? I think it might have, because you've actually got to get to a point where something tells you you can do something different. And for me, maybe that's an element of intuition. So I've grown up doing A, and then at some point in time I realized, but hold on, I can actually do B or C or X or Y or Z. And I don't see how that can be instinct. That has to be something beyond instinct. That for me is perhaps where, look, I think humans are obviously, in some cases, maybe in most cases, significantly better than some of the other animals, but I also think we're significantly worse in some cases, because we do things probably that we shouldn't be doing as a result of that capacity to feel a thought, to feel an idea, and we start doing something which is perhaps innately wrong. And if you go back to our discussions on learning from nature and how we've diverged from things which instinctively we should know are right for us, and are good for us, and we've moved away from those things now. Is that a break of instinct, or is it is it an intuition that simply led us astray, or something completely different? I'm not sure. But yeah, I think it's obviously a highly complex topic, and some people rely on their intuition very, very heavily. Logical, analytical people like me, perhaps not so much. We tend to discount those things from time to time, but perhaps we operate on intuition a lot more than we actually realize. And I do agree. I think there's a fine line perhaps between instinct and intuition at times. Obviously the real deep instinctive reactions to things. We spoke about goosebump moments and the fact that it's actually it's a hardwired reaction that comes from way back when in our development. So you can see I'm grappling with this one a little bit. The instinct. Yes.
Yeah, so Ivan, I wanted just, as we've been talking, I've sort of had two thoughts. And the one is that many years ago, I was listening to an Oprah interview, and she was talking about or interviewing people who'd been victims of some violent crime, and basically kind of walking back, when did you know you were in trouble? And almost all of them had and I would say it's instinct, that prey predator instinct that is we're still, because we are as human beings actually very vulnerable. We don't have a lot of arsenal at our disposal. in terms of dealing with predators. And so our instinct has to be finely honed to be able to suss out danger. And yet, what we very often have done is we have that instinct to run or to hide or to not go with the stranger, despite the fact that they, you know, sharing some story or whatever the case may be. But we override it. And that's what happened 9 times out of 10 with these victims, is that they felt that instinct, and then they thought, oh no, I'm making, you know, I'm making it up, or I'm exaggerating, or this couldn't possibly be true. You don't imagine yourself in that situation, and we've sort of lulled ourselves, I think, in our world to think that the world is safe, and that certainly when we were had our home invasions, that was my big takeaway, is I was living as if the world was safe. And I know that sounds quite cynical, but I'm grateful for that moment, because it's kept my antenna open, or to keep that a sense of possible danger and being aware. And I think awareness is one of our greatest tools to avoid danger. I know if I'd been more aware, certainly in the first situation, it wouldn't have happened. So that's the one thing. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about is counterintuitive, is where our intuition says that this is likely to be true, or we believe it's true because our intuition tells us, but the opposite is actually true. And I was listening to, I had, you know, Paul, you met Paul, who is part of our Wisdom's Chats. And so I facilitate mentorship circles for SMMEs that fall under the banner of her company. And they were saying, well, you know, the problem is now nobody's got any money, and so everything is on price. So you can only sell your products on the cheapest price. And she was saying, actually, that's not true. Yes, everybody is assessing the cost, but the value of the item is chosen on the risk to the budget. So they're finding, for example, that people are still paying more for rice. They're not choosing the cheapest rice. They're paying more for rice because if they choose the cheapest rice, their family won't eat it. It's not the waste of that cheap product is not worth the cost of the higher price. So our intuition says, oh, everything is now on price. But when you do the research, it's category by category. Milk, yes, I'm happy to buy the cheapest price because cheap milk tastes the same as expensive milk. But the other things, I can't remember. She named a couple of things where the price was holding because of the quality of the product yeah. So it was just a simple example of counterintuitive information.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on that animal, I can't even say it now, animal behavior thing, because I think as humans, we tend to want to see human traits in animals. And I think very much what you described, Ivan, was learned behavior. I saw a YouTube video yesterday, actually, of a dog helping this guy out, and he was doing amazing things, but it was learned behavior. And I think with a lot of animals, it's accidental learned behavior when they do things. And it might be accidental learned behavior that's been passed on over the generations. And I think we do have a habit of trying to see human traits in animals. And yeah, they do some remarkable things. You know, there's some birds that can work out how to sort of plop stones in a jar of water to get a fruit to float, get to the top. But that's learned behavior. It's not rational thought. It's not intuition. It's not whatever. It's just a learned behavior, I think. But yeah, but I think there is a special women's intuition, isn't there? Because they kind of always catch us out with their women's intuition. Whenever we've done something wrong or we shouldn't have done, we get caught out. And I think that's because of, again, it's because using those patterns. You see one pattern and you think, aha, that happened before. That's similar to that. He's done that. Yeah.
Guilt looks very obvious. I'm sure you've all experienced it with your kids, where they've done something wrong and they think they've hidden it, and it's hidden in plain sight. And they think you are magic because you have identified this wrong thing that they've done, and they can't believe that you basically have eyes on the back of your head.
My niece used to work for me when I sold ice creams, and one day she said, "How is it your sister always knows when I've done something wrong?" And I said, "Give me an example." And she gave me an example. I said, "Well, it's quite obvious, because that's exactly what your mother did when she was a child."
Yeah, it is interesting. I was just trying to, yeah, the word I can never pronounce and even less spell. So thank goodness for Google's corrections. But Anthropomorphis, I think is how you say it.
That's the word.
Correct?
I didn't use it because I can't pronounce it.
Yeah, yeah. Like it is an interesting, thing. But if you've made a mistake and you have the capacity to repeat that mistake because it gave you a positive result, that has to indicate to me some level of intelligence. It's maybe not human intelligence, but and then to teach it, or to learn it from another, because you can observe them, becomes a very interesting thing. I mean, that's how our children learn, isn't it? I mean, they learn by watching us. They don't learn by what we tell them. I think that's probably the thing they least learn from, is what we tell them. They learn from watching what we do and imitating. So yeah, a very interesting process. And so the more you see it, and then the temptation is to give human qualities to animals. But it's fascinating. I mean, I've just seen so many different things. I mean, someone did a test with predators to see their level of ability to solve a problem, and they put a carcass in a steel cage, which the predators couldn't get into, but there was a way to open the cage, and various predators came along, sensing the carcass. They tried to get in, eventually gave up and went away. And this was in Africa, and the only species that actually solved the problem was spotted hyenas. So they came along, they walked around and eventually worked out, here's something I can yank the bolt, opened the door and got the carcass. Lions couldn't do it. Other animals couldn't do it, but the spotted hyenas got it right, and they changed the mechanism, and they got it right again, and they got it right again, and that to me indicates a level of reasoning, and an ability to solve a problem, where the others just scratched and battered and pushed and just gave up. So we did the things we normally do to try and access stuff, didn't work, so okay, let's go somewhere else. But spotted hyenas actually got it right time and time again, which is quite amazing, and they couldn't have learned that from anywhere else. And of course, if you haven't seen the video of Stoffel, honey badger, you need to look at Stoffel on YouTube. Stoffel is quite an amazing creature, and how he continually works out how to break free from the enclosure that he was kept in to protect him, because I think he was originally injured, and I mean, he would roll rocks up to the side of the wall and balance them on top of each other and climb over them. He would pick up a rake or a fork or a spade that had been accidentally left in his enclosure, put it up against the side of the wall, climb up it and get away. He would climb up gates and open them with, open the sliding bolts with his teeth. You look at something like that and just the amazing amount of, I can't think of another word to use, intelligence. That a creature like that has ingenuity, perhaps is another word. Just the ability to solve a problem and get a desired result is fascinating. That's it, Lisa. Where do we go from instinct and intuition?
Well, there's sort of been a theme over the last few days, and I don't know whether it's you, Ivan, is that we come back to animals and our interaction with animals. And I mean, I know that Edward's veganism is based on protection of animals. And so I'm wondering whether we can't talk about humans' interaction with animals. And that also comes from having just recently watched a movie on Netflix called Penguin Bloom. And it's the true story of a family that the mom has an accident and ends up in a wheelchair, and is really struggling with the whole idea of being in a wheelchair. And a baby magpie makes its way into their home and changes their lives, this bird. And so, yeah, I'd be interested to know let's talk a little bit more about how humans and animals interact, and how does that work? So, yeah, that's assuming, of course, I mean, humans, if we think about humans being animals or not animals. So how does the human animal interact with the other animals that exist on the planet?
Great. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day further, and we'll talk animals tomorrow. Cheers, man.
Thanks.